I trusted him completely. That was my first mistake. My second was walking into his building with my resume in my hand. For 11 years I built my life around a man I thought I knew completely. I knew how he took his coffee, black, no sugar, always too hot. I knew he hummed quietly when he read something that interested him. I knew the exact kind of silence he slipped into when he was worried about something he didn't want to talk about. I thought those little things meant I knew him. I was wrong about that too. My husband was the managing partner at Lawson and Hartwell, one of the most respected law firms in the city. He had spent 15 years building that reputation before we ever met. He wore it easily, not like a trophy but like it had become part of who he was. When we got married I had just finished my MBA. I had good offers waiting for me. But he was always traveling, always working 80-hour weeks, and together, or at least what I believed was together, we decided I would wait a little before starting my career. We talked about having children. We talked about traveling. We talked about the future the way young couples do, when they still believe that making plans is the same thing as building a life. The children never came. The travel happened, but mostly without him because work always came first. And that little break before I started my career slowly stretched from months into years. By the time I was 38, I had been out of the workforce for almost a decade. I wasn't doing nothing. I volunteered. I sat on nonprofit boards. I took classes and kept my skills current. But there was still that gap on my resume. Every time I looked at it, it felt like pressing on a bruise. When I finally told my husband I wanted to work again, he smiled immediately. "Of course," he said. "Whatever makes you happy." I believed him. Then I mentioned his firm. My background in finance and business administration would have made me a perfect fit for client relations or operations. For the smallest moment he hesitated. Just long enough for something cold to settle in my chest. Then he smiled again. He said he didn't want me to feel like I was living in his shadow. He said the firm was intense and that working there could put pressure on our marriage. He said he wanted me to have something that belonged only to me. My own career, my own identity, separate from him. I thought that was love. I thought he was protecting me. So I applied elsewhere first. 3 different firms. I got interviews. I made it to final rounds. But nothing happened. After 6 months, I was sitting alone at the kitchen table just after midnight, staring at the Lawson and Hartwell careers page on my laptop. And I thought, I am qualified for this. I have every right to apply here. If I got the job, I would earn it myself. My maiden name was still legally mine. Elena Marsh. No one needed to know who I was married to unless I chose to tell them. So I sent in the application under my own name. I didn't lie. I simply didn't mention that I was married to the managing partner. That I told myself I would explain everything if I made it past the first round. I told myself I just wanted to know if I could get in on my own. 3 days later they called. Then came a phone interview. Then an in-person meeting. The morning of the interview felt strangely normal. My husband kissed my cheek before leaving for work, just like always. Routine. Familiar. I stood by the window and watched him drive away, feeling something tangled inside me. Part guilt, part determination. I got dressed carefully, pulled my hair back and looked at myself in the mirror. You're capable, I told myself. You're ready. Whatever happened today, at least I showed up. Lawson and Hartwell occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower downtown. I had only been there once before, years ago when I dropped something off for my husband at reception. I had never seen the actual offices. He had always said the firm was his world and home was ours. I had respected that boundary without ever really asking why it existed. The receptionist sent me up to HR on the 28th floor. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into a quiet, polished hallway. Dark carpet. Framed articles lining the walls. Profiles of the firm, legal journals, charity events. One of them was a magazine spread with my husband's face on it, taken years ago. I walked past it without stopping. The HR coordinator greeted me, a woman in her 40s, glasses pushed up on her head, warm but professional. She shook my hand, offered me water, and sat across from me with my resume printed neatly in front of her. We talked for about 10 minutes before she paused. There's just one standard question, she said. We require disclosure of any personal or professional relationships with employees or leadership, to avoid conflicts of interest. I had been waiting for that. I took a breath and answered calmly. The managing partner, Marcus Lawson, is my husband. Her reaction stayed with me. It wasn't shock exactly. It was something else. Something that flickered across her face for just a second. Confusion. Like she was trying to rearrange what she had just heard into something that made sense and couldn't. She blinked. Looked down at my resume. Then back at me. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "Did you say you're Marcus Lawson's wife?" "Yes," I said. "I understand there may need to be a conflict review. I'm completely prepared for that." She nodded, but something in her expression hadn't settled. "Ma'am, I'm going to pause our conversation for a moment," she said carefully. "I just need to clarify something." She stood and left. She was gone for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. The way you watch time when something inside you already knows something is wrong, but your mind hasn't caught up yet. When she came back, she wasn't alone. Another woman walked in beside her. Tall, dark hair, sharp blazer, the kind of presence that suggested she had been pulled away from something important. "This is the head of client relations," the coordinator said. The woman stepped forward and held out her hand. "Diana Lawson." I shook her hand automatically. My body moved before my mind did. But the second I looked at her face, something inside me went completely still. Clear. Calm. The way everything goes quiet right before impact. She was looking at me the same way. Neither of us spoke. The HR coordinator cleared her throat gently. "There may be some administrative confusion," she said. "Perhaps the two of you would like a moment?" Diana cut in not unkindly. "That would be fine." He turned to me. "Can we use the conference room down the hall?" I followed her. I don't remember deciding to. I just did. We sat across from each other at a table meant for 6. The room was quiet, too quiet. She studied me for a long moment before asking, "How long have you been married to him?" 11 years, I said. Something shifted in her expression. Her lips pressed together like she was holding something in place. Then she said, "He and I got married 4 years ago." For a second the room didn't feel real. She kept speaking, but I remember the window behind her more than her words. The light falling across the table. The city stretched out below. He had met him at a conference. He had been charming. Kind of brilliant. The same man I had married. He told her he'd been divorced for 7 years. That his first marriage ended because his ex-wife couldn't handle his career. That it was amicable. Clean. Finished. He told her everything she needed to believe him. And she did. Because he was the kind of man who made doubt feel unreasonable. After they married, he brought her into the firm. Said he wanted to support her career. Said he wanted her close. She built her position there on her own merit. And everyone at the firm knew her as Mrs. Lawson, the managing partner's wife. Except she wasn't. As I was. I wish I could say I broke down right there. That I cried. That I lost control. That would make the story easier. Cleaner. But I didn't. I just sat there, completely still. But the truth is, something inside me didn't break. It went still. Focused. For 11 years I had trusted him completely. And in those 11 years, I had made myself smaller in ways I was only now beginning to understand. I turned down opportunities. I stayed quiet when something didn't feel right. I believed him when he said he was protecting me. Every limit he placed on my life I accepted and called it love. I looked at the woman sitting across from me. He was just as still. The kind of stillness that comes when the ground has been pulled out from under you, but you haven't fallen yet. We had both believed him. And in that moment I made a decision. "I need to ask you something," I said. "And I need you to answer honestly. Did you know about me?" He didn't hesitate. "No." I believed her immediately. Not because I was naive, but because I had just watched her learn the truth. Grief doesn't look like performance. "I believe you," I said. And then I told her what I thought we needed to do next. There's a version of this story where I go home that night and confront him, screaming in the kitchen while he denies everything. There's a version where I fall apart. Where I cry for weeks. Where I need other people to put me back together. That's not what happened. The grief came, but quietly. In early mornings. In the space before I had to function again. But the confrontation? That was different. The first thing I did was call my sister. She's a lawyer, family law, not corporate, but she's been practicing for 12 years and she's very good at what she does. She listened to me for 45 minutes without interrupting. Then she said, "Elena, listen to me. Do not go home tonight. Come here." So I did. I stayed with her for 2 weeks. In that time, everything started moving. Fast, precise, irreversible. She filed for an emergency protective order, citing financial control. Until that moment, I hadn't even had the language for it. But she explained that the way he handled our finances, total control, limited access, qualified as financial abuse. She started asset discovery. Brought in a forensic accountant. By the end of the first week, Diana had her own attorney too. By day 3, she had already contacted the Bar Association. Because this wasn't just personal, it was professional misconduct. A managing partner had entered a second legal marriage while still legally married to someone else. What we uncovered wasn't shocking. But it was clarifying. He had built his life like a system. 2 marriages. 2 versions of himself. 2 women who believed they were the only one. And every part of it benefited him. Diana's career strengthened his firm's client relations. My networks gave him access to philanthropic circles. Stripped down to its coldest truth, we weren't partners. We were assets. 6 weeks after that interview, the district attorney filed bigamy charges. The Bar Association opened a disciplinary case the same week. The other partners, who genuinely had no idea, moved quickly to remove him as managing partner. None of what followed was easy. The divorce took 14 months. There were days I felt exhausted in a way that lived in my bones. Days I looked back at the years I had made myself smaller and felt a kind of grief that didn't have clean edges. But something else happened too. I went back to Lawson and Hartwell. Not the way I had imagined, but on my own terms. 2 of the remaining partners reached out to me. Separately. They apologized. One of them, a woman who had been a partner for years, told me she had always found his strict separation between work and home unusual. But she had assumed it was just a preference for privacy. He said she was sorry. And she meant it. Then she told me they needed someone. A director of business development. Someone with a background in finance. Someone who understood nonprofit networks. Someone like me. I took a week to think about it. Mostly I spent that week rewriting my resume. For the first time, I didn't minimize anything. I included the boards. The volunteer work. The courses. The skills I had built during the years I thought I wasn't building anything at all. I started on a Tuesday in March. Diana was still there. She had been given the choice to leave or stay, and the firm had made one thing clear. She had been deceived, not complicit. Her work spoke for itself. She chose to stay. We're not friends. Not exactly. What we share is too complicated for that word. But there's an understanding between us. We both loved the same man. We were both diminished by him in different ways. And when the truth came out, we chose not to turn on each other. She told me once, over coffee in the break room, that the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing she had to rebuild her own sense of judgment from the ground up. I nodded and told her I understood that completely. I told her I thought that's where the real work lay. Not in the legal battles, not in the financial settlement, not even in the grief itself. The real work was learning to trust yourself again. She nodded. And eventually trusting other people too, the right ones, she said. I agreed. My settlement was finalized on a Thursday in October. I didn't celebrate. I sat in my sister's kitchen with a cup of coffee and felt the quiet of something being truly over. My former husband had lost his partnership. He was facing trial on the bigamy charge and had been suspended from practicing law pending the bar's ruling. For 14 months of proceedings, he hadn't looked at me once outside the mediation room. And I didn't need him to. Somewhere along the way, I realized almost everything I thought I had received from him, I had built myself. The position at the firm turned out to be exactly what I needed. My network in the philanthropic sector, the one I had cultivated through years of volunteer board work, once dismissed as a consolation for not having a real career, opened doors for the firm's pro bono and community relations practice that hadn't existed before. Within 8 months, I had brought in 3 new clients and restructured the business development pipeline in a way the remaining partners called transformative at the annual review. I don't tell this story for credit. I tell it because for 11 years I believed I had chosen the life I was living. I believed the limits I had accepted were protections. I believed that someone's love, or claim of love, gave them the right to decide what was best for me. The morning I walked into that building with my resume, I was still half convinced I was doing something wrong. Sneaky, maybe a little dishonest. I had rehearsed apologies in the elevator, thinking I might need to make amends for daring to try. Then I stepped into a conference room and realized the only person I owed an apology to was myself. There's one more thing. A few weeks after I started at the firm, a junior associate stopped me in the lobby on my way out for lunch. She looked young, 25, maybe 26, and hesitant, like she'd rehearsed her words 100 times and still wasn't sure. She told me she'd heard my story, not the details but the shape of it, the way stories travel in a professional environment. She was dealing with something in her own relationship and wanted advice. I thought for a moment about everything I'd learned in the past 18 months. Everything I wished someone had told me at 26. I said, pay attention to the things he doesn't want you to do. Not the things he asks you to avoid out of love or concern, but the ones that shrink you, that leave you smaller than before under the guise of care. Notice who you're becoming inside the relationship, not just the happy version of yourself he likes. And trust yourself, really trust your mind. Not blindly, not without thought, but as your starting point. It's yours. No one else can manage it as long as you keep listening. He thanked me. I don't know if it helped. I hope it did. I finished my coffee, stepped out into the city and felt the bright, cold light on my face. I paused, letting it touch me. I had believed in him completely for 11 years. I had believed in us. Now I believe in myself. And it turns out that is more than enough.